Hello and welcome for the third part of the tank import tutorial for ArmA 3. So we're still on the Crusader tank, and today we're going to talk about physX and especially how to create the physX parameters, to tweak them and to upgrade to the tank's DLC standard. So since last time I just fixed a few memory point names that were not matching with my configs, and I also fixed the tracks which were not rotating correctly. So it was mostly redoing the UV because of a mistake in the planification phase of the model work. So we're going to start first with the changes on the model itself, then we will move on to the physX config and tweaking in-game, and we'll review all parameters, what did change for the tanks DLC, so you guys will be up to date. So first with 3D, if you followed my previous tutorial and you want to upgrade your tank to the tank's DLC standards, you don't have anything to do but redo the land contact load. So everything else is fine. For the land contact load in last tutorial, I was not updated yet on the tank's DLC workflow, so I told you to do something like this with no named selection and just 3 points. So this is deprecated completely, and to make the land contact now you have to retrieve the bound of every wheel like this. You don't have to select the sprockets bounds, so just the wheels that are always in contact with the ground. You copy them, make a new file, paste it here. I'm going to save this file as a memory update. If I'm not mistaken, that's the name in my script. I'm recording it. I can close this, so you see that the name selections here are bound, blah blah. And I'm going to run the script. So with the bat file here, that is going to look for the memory update p3d, launch a bio2s script, and this script here I will put it in the description of the video, but TLDR is that it will rename the bound to podcolo p1 blah blah blah, so to the actual standard of the tracks. So I'm just going to run this bat file here, and that's it. And if I go back in my file, all the points were renamed to the correct naming. The interest of doing this move is that your land contact is going to match perfectly with the memory point bounds, so you don't have to retrieve them there manually, remerge in the center, blah blah blah. It's going fast. It took us 3 clicks, and we are done on the 3D changes. Easy. Now for the bad part, so the the config work. If you already did any tank import, you must have used the GearRatios files as sample. So that's basically what I had previously. So you can easily recognize it by the setup. So it's a simple 1 gear gearbox, and the speed will increase on the given gearbox up to the maximum speed, limited by 1 factor. So that this is what if you are used to the physX setup. So it's pretty much the BI setup plus some values and some tweaks done by Red Phoenix back then. So this is completely deprecated. It won't work correctly. You will have bad physics behavior. You will have bad wheels turning speed, probably troubles with the tank steering left or right by itself, so it's completely deprecated. Still, we want to keep a few values, which are engine power, tank turn force if you tweaked it already, the suspensions or dampers parameters here to adjust the strength of the springs, and that's it pretty much. All the rest is going to be completely changed. So to change it, here I have I'm going to increase a bit the size of the text. Okay, this is the new setup made by Riyad, who worked for GearRatios and is now working on in BI. So he provided us a sample file that I have adapted a little bit for the World War II tanks, and to make something quite broad and that I can use on all of my tanks. So here I'm going to transfer the values. So this one is the Panzer 5, so the Panther config, so I'm not going to save it, but just use it before I copy paste it back to the file once I have retrieved the parameters. So here I'm changing the engine power, which is in kilowatts. You can convert it with Google Converter from horsepowers. The max speed is the given max speed. So if you are used to doing some tanks, this is working now. It wasn't before, and this is actually forcing the tank to stall when it reaches this speed. Then here it's spring mass, spring set, strength, spring damper rate. So those are pretty much how much mass is given on every damper, how much the spring is going to resist to the mass, and how fast the spring is going to get back to its original position. All those parameters are in a new BI wiki entry here with all the updated parameters, new formulas, etc. It's replacing the former tanks, CFG vehicle configs, CFG tanks config, especially everything that is related to physX, so car X, tank X, and so on. So everything is there. So if you are looking for something related to spring, for example, you have all the formulas here, blah blah blah. So it's a wiki. It's quite complete. I reviewed most of it and it's up to date. And that's it. So I retrieved the values I wanted, and it's going to be quite violent here. I'm going to just erase all my previous file and use this one. Again, I will put you the I forgot to check one thing. I will put you the base file so you can retrieve it directly by copy pasting. What I did not check here is the number of wheels. So I have 6 wheels plus the R1, R7 and L1, L7. But those are going to be completely changed because actually I explained it a bit later. I'm just going to paste it for now. So R6, R7, and I'm going just to update there. There. I will explain you in a just when I have it cleaned up. I will explain to you the wheels, the new wheel setup. Okay. So I don't need the sample file anymore. So the wheels. So the wheels Previously, if we get back into the model for a bit easier visualization, previously as physX wheels, you had of course all the wheels here that are in contact with the ground, and you also had the sprockets that were physX wheel, but they are not touching the ground, and so you will read everywhere that it is recommended to have those two wheels as physX wheels. The thing is that physX engine absolutely hates when a wheel is supposed to be touching the ground, but it's not. So it's constantly trying to bring the two sprockets that are here for back and forth, forward and backwards. It constantly tries to bring them there, bring the wheels there, and of course it doesn't succeed because you force the max droop to and max compression to 0 because the sprockets are not supposed to be dampened. So Riyadh advised me to try to disable them, and I noticed that the physX behavior instantly became much more reliable, and to my knowledge, this is the setup they are using on VBS now. So I decided to expand this system where the two sprockets are disabled to all the iron front tanks. It happened that it fixed quite a lot of weird physX behaviors, so I was very happy and I kept it. The only adaptation you have to do, and it's done if you followed my previous content, so your model should be updated, my previous tutorial, so your model should be updated, that the tracks here, I moved them up like this compared to the geometry load here, and in fact when you bring that here, it's going to make the sprockets have some collision. Here you see that it is a bit too high, so I'm going to readjust it very slightly, and it will, since the sprockets are not wheels anymore and you still want them to have collision, because when you are going to hit a steep slope or fall into a ditch, you don't want the ground to get inside the vehicle, of course, or inside the sprocket, because the sprocket won't have any physics calculation. So to prevent this, we have the geometry physics load here that is going to take the place and do this job actually of collision. So I disabled them. You can still have them, you can disable them, it's up to you. I recommend you to have some extensive testing of the two setups and choose the one that fits the best to your tank. And yes, that's it. Now on the wheels itself, there are a few changes, especially on the moment of inertia here, but we're going to go every parameter. So before I'm doing this, you see that all the wheels have absolutely no config change. They are just changing the center memory point, the boundary memory point, and the animation. So here it's quite simple config. Related to the parameters now, so the button name is the model config entry for the dampers animation. Center is the memory point, boundary is the memory point. Damping is the deprecated value from car X, as far as I know, since it's not in my reference file, so I can get rid of it. Steering is going to tell if the wheel is steerable or not. The tanks won't like this. It's supposed to be, I don't remember if they are going to enable it soon or not. You have to check it on the dev branch changelog, but for now, if you activate the steering on a tank, it's going to crash to desktop, so you don't want to have it unless further notice in the ArmA switch changelog. The side is left, right. Width and mass, I never change it, keep it base values. Now for the moment of inertia, you have it's a bit complicated calculation, but technically this is the mass, this is the width, and this is the radius of the wheel in meters. So Riyadh is using this value here. I'm using a bit higher values. I will explain to you when we will start the tweaking phase. The lat stiff Y and X are for the sliding of the tank on the ground. All this here is kind of the grip the tracks will have on the ground. Still, when you are tweaking your tank, go to the wiki, verify the parameter. If the base value is doing some weird behavior on the tank, you have to change it. Otherwise, those are quite standard values that should fit and make your tank playable without any major tweaking. Max brake torque, self-explanatory. It means of much every wheel is going to apply braking torque. Those were reviewed already. The damping rate now. So the damping rate is going to give the acceleration allowed into the gear. It's a bit complicated to explain. We'll try to visualize it on tweaking. The damping rate in air is much more easy to explain. In fact, when the tank is advancing, you have a kind of air friction to the front, like if it was a bullet. And the higher this value is, the higher this friction is going to be. So the tanks will be, the higher it is, the harder it is for the tank to reach its max speed. So you can use it whether to prevent it to reach its max speed too fast or to go over its max speed, especially on descending slopes, etc. Damping rate destroyed is when your track is destroyed, you have a very high value, so the tank can't move on one side. Suspension travel direction, you are not supposed to change it, but you can have suspensions here. It's in Y, so up and down. And there the max droop and max compression, they are the exact same values are as in here. I'm not sure that my values are correct actually, or should it be inherited? Yes, that's inherited, so I have to. Okay. So we see that here my wheel pot color source damper has an offset 0 of minus 0.14 and offset 1 of 0.14. So it's going to be the animation of the compression and the droop, and we want to retrieve this in our config here. You have to set the same values. It's quite important, otherwise the engine doesn't know where the wheel is supposed to be. So you have some offset animations between the physX wheel and the visual wheel. I think I will make a little sketch for this to explain it to you. And then friction versus slip graph is something I still don't understand exactly how to tweak it, but it has some influence on the grip of your tracks depending on the speed of the tank. So it's pretty much the slip at maximum torque, optimal torque, and maximum torque. Then the number of physical wheels was not in Riyadh file, but I kept it. I don't quite know why. It also helps me to know how many wheels I have in this, so I don't have to count them. So here it's 12. Those values here are new. So you have the tank turn force that I did not report, but if I recall correctly, it was 220,000. Then you have those values here that are explained here by Riyadh. I did not tweak those, but I tweaked those, and those here are interesting because you will often see the tanks kinda Oops. We see the tanks can have weird behaviors on startup, so when you will press forward, they are going to have their nose climbed up in a weird behavior, and so this parameter allows you to add an additional force to the tank. So you have your tank, it's a box like this. When you're going to accelerate, it will go with this vector plus, you don't know why, but there is a kind of force that applies here, so your tank is going to nose up very hard before this speed is going to be constant. The parameter added here is going to, instead of applying the force to the center of gravity, which will make your tank move this way, it's going to apply the force a bit forward or backwards depending on the behavior you have, and so it's going to reduce this this effect to this and this instead of a big there and a big there. So it's a very simple trick to do. You just have to make a few startups and have your correct value. Since I'm in the drawing stuff, in fact I'm going to explain to you the physics wheels and the visual wheel. So in your model you defined a name selection for your wheels, with the visual part of the load. So this is the hull, let's say, and so this is going to move up and down based on the axis you gave it, etc. Then you have signed, so it will be in red, a memory point as axis and as bound. Now when your model is animated, the wheel here is going to move and the memory points are going to move. The thing is, the memory points here, they are moving based on the physics config. So I'll set HPP because I have an include, but I have my physics SPP file, so I have the droop and the compression, whereas the visual wheel here is going to move based on the model.cfg. Yep. So if the droop compression and the model.cfg do not match, you will have something like this. You will have your wheel like would be compressed to a certain value, which is going to be actually under the minimum. Shit. And then you will have your memory points that will not be in the center, but you will have your center like there and your bound like there, and it will do that the ground will be here, so your wheel will remain inside the ground and it's not going to compress as much as the points, so it's going to make this, or the opposite, it's going to compress more than the points, so you will have your wheel like this, but your points will be like this, and so your ground is going to be below the wheel, and you will have levitating vehicles because all your wheels are going to be compressed but not the memory points, and it's going to fly. So you really want to have the max droop, max compression bound to the model.cfg values. It's quite simple, but if you did not understand that, you end up with, like me, with levitating tanks, and you try to tweak indefinitely the values and you can't match, you can't find anything that match, of course, because your model.cfg is wrong. It's not matching what you would like it to look like, and it's crap. So yeah, if you ever have wheels not matching not touching the ground when damping, it's whether this here which is wrong most of the time, or these values here, they have offset 1 and offset 2, offset 0, sorry, and it was like minus 0.14, and here it was 0.14, and so it happens if your axis has been selected in the wrong order in Object Builder, that those values have to be reverted. The way to notice this is that the position of your wheel, your wheel is going to compress when it's supposed to drop. So you just have to change the minus here and move it to the other value. Now we have the fun part. Let's skip the gearbox for now. I'll come back to it in a very few moments. Same here. We'll just keep the thrust delay. Thrust delay time it takes from 0 to thrust to 1. So 0.5, I kept it. I used to use 0, but since the physics are fixed now, I'm using the default value. And here we have the engine braking at given thrust. Quite simple. For the engine itself, we have engine power, so I explained it. The engine moment of inertia. The BI tanks have, if I don't mistake, they have 12. They all have 12 or something in that kind of value. Let me check. Yeah, yes, they are 12. I increased to 50. Values over 50 starts to have some weird behaviors because the values are not supposed to be that high. Even 50 is quite high, but the interest of the engine MOI is that so it's a moment of inertia. For those who don't do physics, it's simply imagine your engine is a wheel that is going to turn around an axis and is going to make all the wheels turn at the same speed. If you have a small moment of inertia, it's going to do a lot of turns for very small. So the acceleration is going to be very fast because it's easy to make a small ball to turn. If you have a very large ball, it's going to be very hard to turn because here the distance, the average distance is much bigger. So this has an influence on the duration at on the duration where the tank. Oh shit! How can I explain this? The higher the MOI, the engine MOI is, the longer the tank will stay on one gear before reaching the maximum RPM, and then so before it changes its gear. So if I have a small moment of inertia, I have a maximum RPM of 3000. It's going to take 1.4 seconds with 12 engine MOI to reach the maximum RPM and change gear on the first gear, so 1.4 seconds. By increasing the engine MOI to 50, I managed to increase the duration of the gear to 9 seconds approximately, depending on the tank and its weight. So the gear, instead of moving from gear 1 to gear 2 in 1.4 seconds, I increased to 9.4 seconds. It's interesting because during these 9 seconds, the tank is going to go from 1000 to 3000 RPM, and the RPM have absolutely no value, no interest, but to help the sounds to play. So the sound are going to play based on the RPM value. If your tank is going from 1000 to 3000 in 1 second, your sound is going to go from low revolution to high revolution in 1 second. So the sound is impossible to hear, and you can have the best sound out there. It's going to sound like shit because in 1 second you don't have the time to appreciate the quality of the sound. It's going to go full speed from idle to full speed in 1 second, so it's definitely not good. Then the max omega and minimum omega is the number of turns in radian per second at maximum RPM, minimum RPM. Here I kept the standard value provided by Riyadh because yes, I prefer to have all my tanks with the same engine. I just changed the engine power, so I have a consistent behavior and I don't have to tweak too many values. And anyway, physX engine is not very good, so it's not the weight of the tank and the number of wheels and other parameters will have much more influence than those two. So just design choice, decided to go the easiest way for my tanks. The last value before we move on to the torque and gear is the fuel capacity. So as you can see here is, if you multiply this by 3, it will give you the time before the fuel tank is empty. So what I did is I took the maximum autonomy of the tank, divided I took the maximum speed, maximum autonomy to have the fastest way to empty the tank, and then I divided it per 3. So I have some decent playable values, so it's not too long, not too short, about 4 hours for a tank in game time, instead of a full day in real life. Brake idle speed, meter per second first and brake when slower. It's going to help your tank stop when it's not going fast enough. Max speed, we talked about it. There is the normal speed forward coef is going to be when you press W to go forward, it's going to apply 0.75 thrust, and if you press shift, which is the value below, you're going to add the missing 0.25 thrust. And finally, the water resistance coef is how much the tank is going to struggle to drive into the water. Simple. Here for the torque curve, I just did a very simple one. I'm going to open Excel to allow you to have a visual aspect of it. So I have so you see that left is the maximum RPM on the left column, and right is the in fact you just have a link between the number of RPM and the torque applied at given RPM. This is going to apply in every gear, not on the global acceleration. So when you change from gear 1 to gear 2, you start back at the first line. So 1000 RPM out of 3000, you will have 3366 torque out of 4950. So I'm going to give to keep it. Should I do it or quickly? Because I don't have the English words for the curves anyway. So here this is the maximum torque given at 2140 RPM for all tanks, because I kept this for all my tanks currently. It might evolve later on, but I had to quick fix every tanks in 1 week, so I did not have time to make a lot of tweaking. And now, so you see here the torque curve is going to increase progressively up to the value of 2140 RPM, and then it's going to reduce. It's like when you're on your gear in your car at very high RPM on the gear, you don't have a lot of torque, and then the RPM is going to increase constantly from 1000 to 3000 by unit of time. It's always the same linear, simple linear curve. Now on the gearbox, what is changed radically is this parameter. which is going to tell the gear is going to change based on some RPM ratio. The difference with the former parameters that we had is that before the gearbox was changed based on the torque value, and now we have based on the RPM value. So it's much more easy to locate because the gear is going to go increasingly up to 3000. And so here we simply tell that you're going to change from neutral gear to upper gear given at 1000 up to this value. So I just here kept the values. It's simple curves as well, and it allowed me to have multiple gears because the former physX version of the tanks, they were not the gearbox were not working correctly, so you remained on gear 1 and you were never able to reach gear 2. So what we did, or what Red Phoenix did on RHS, is that he removed every gear, put everything on gear 1, and tweaked the dampingRateInAir to prevent the tank to reach above its max speed. So you had to tweak this indefinitely to some crazy negative values. Sometimes it was just crazy to find the exact values that stopped the tank at the max speed that was not working at the time. So now we just have working gears with ratios, and it's really good. I really recommend you to read the RPM ratio and these gear values. It's working well. Then you can go up to 6 gears, I guess. I don't want to mistake, but you can check that on the wiki. And if you look at the ratios here, it's a bit the same principle as the MOI. The higher the ratio is, I don't want to tell any bullshit. The higher the ratio is, the faster you will go on high RPM, I think. We'll tweak it anyway, so if I'm saying bullshit, I'm going to notice it when I'm, or re-explain it anyway when I will tweak the transmission ratio and especially the reverse speed. And so that's it. We reviewed all the parameters, and since this is updated, I just have to build my tank with my new contact load, and I just have then to simply rebuild my configs, and we can move on to the in-game tweaking. So it has no sound because it's not configured, so you have to focus here on the top left, and I'm going to enable this. So you need to run diag to the dev branch exec file. It allows you to use diag parameters. I'm going to open it quickly because it's very interesting if you don't know it. So you have a bunch of commands that allows you to add a lot of input directly on the screen. So I'm using the vehicle one, so diag enable true, but you can also use it to merge config files. That's what I'm using here on top. I'm going to get to this in a minute, but here for now, let's see with the AP vehicle diag enable true. We have, so on the screen, I don't know if it's going to be easy to read, but first line you have the thrust of the tank, so you can see it moving. Here I'm at 44 kilometers per hour, and my thrust is limited at 0.48 with the full speed mode activated. Then you have the brake, so it's binary, so 0, 1, thrust left, thrust right if you're going to turn. The RPM is the second line. the current gear is third and fourth line, the average rotation speed of the wheels, and then you see the gear change with a little arrow on the very left that is moving constantly between the gears. So when you start playing it, so you can already see some more or less weird behaviors. You want to check first the RPM value. So here, look, we're going from 0 and check how long it takes to go to 3000. 3000 change gear, 3000 change gear, 3000 change gear. And here is going to stall between third and fourth gear because of the transmission ratios. So we will want to tweak it. Now, in terms of max speed, you can see that at my maximum speed of 44, my RPM is 2600. So I want to bring it to 3000. So when I am at maximum speed, I have the sound of the maximum speed. It does nothing in terms of physics. It's just really for sound. For your sound designer, you want the engine RPM to be highest RPM at highest speed. So for this, otherwise you can see that the gears are very jittery. It's like it's increasing and changing gear very, very strongly and makes some very clunchy gear changes. It worked quite well. You see that you have if you have wheels about this size, you won't have any issue of moment of inertia. If you have smaller wheels, you will have to raise the axis memory point about 0.018 in Object Builder. So I repeat, if you have smaller wheels, so like the Chairman's wheels, here on the right, let's go there. You will want to raise the wheel memory point axis by y equal plus 0.018. So in fact, instead of having the axis here, you will have the axis about here. It's not going to modify the visual wheel, what I was talking a bit earlier. It's not just going to modify the moment of inertia of the physX wheel, and it will prevent your tank to reach very, very high speeds or to slip left or to steer by itself left and right. So you want to have quite big wheels. Like if you look at the Churchill, which is not working yet, it's just there so I don't forget it. But the wheels are very, very small, and I know that it's going to be crappy to tweak. But here the Crusader has quite standard wheels, so no problem. And with the MOI, I set the same. If you want to have a high engine MOI, you need some high wheels MOI because it will give even more speed to the wheels. So you want to quite force a high MOI in the wheels to allow a high MOI in the engine. So that's a bit technical, but by playing with the values, you will notice that the changes can be very, very big. Here I'm copying the path to the file, and I will replace physX.hpp, which is my include file, by config.cpp. Okay, so this is ready, and now I can tweak it. So usually I have it on my second screen, but here for obvious reasons I'm going to do it on the screen. And I'm going to start with the reverse speed. So for medium, so this is the light tank, and for light tanks I like to reach about 14 or 16 kilometers per hour. Here you see that I'm stuck at minus 12 in reverse. So we're going to change the ratio, the gearbox ratio of reverse 1 And so if you see, if I set minus 18, let's set this arbitrarily, local exec, it's going to load my new config. I can reload in virtual garage, and here you see minus 18 is going to stall my tank at minus 4, because the bigger the ratio is, the less torque is going to be transmitted to the wheels. So a good value is about minus 8, minus 9 for the reverse gear. And here I should did I fail my merge, or is the value wrong for this? Okay, value is wrong, so let's say minus 6. Actually, I'm stupid because I wasn't going fast enough with minus 4, so I won't go fast enough if I don't go below minus 4. So let's set minus 3. So that's a very typical model behavior on ArmA 3 physics. It's like you tend to enter values without thinking, and you end up with weird stuff. So I was at minus 19. Okay, minus 16 is good for a light tank, light early war tank, small, quite low weight, and quite weak. So I don't want to make it too punitive in reverse speed. Now for the fact that the tank is not reaching the 3000 RPM at max speed. If I recall correctly, this is going to be this value, transmission ratios, remaining drivetrain ratios, final drive. And here I don't remember if I have to make it higher or lower, so I'm just setting some very different value. So I just compare right now what is the new behavior. Sorry, see, whoa. So here you see that my tank is stalling and is going back, is stuck at between the gears. It's like it doesn't know what gear it has to be at max speed. So it means that my transmission ratio is too low. Let's set 22. I'm using very strong difference between values, but it's really to be able to locate okay, you see here I'm at 43, maximum RPM 3000, but I reached 3000 in last gear far before. Oh shit, the ratios are terrible. Okay, here I'm at 2000, 4000. If I press shift, I'm going to reach 3000 at 41 instead of 44. So it is a bit high. So let's reduce it to 21 and retry. Here I'm stalling. Yeah, that's not good. So max speed is good, max RPM is good, but if I don't press shift, the tank is struggling between the gears 3 and 4 on max thrust, without the shift. Crap. So So I'm just pressing W. It's a bit, at least it's not changing gears, so I think I have a right value. Ah, it is. Holy shit. I'm going to keep 22 then. Better the 2 RPM too fast than struggling with the gears. Well, I hope it's not going to struggle still there. It's okay, here it's quite stable. So I'm going to keep this, and it reaches 3000 before, but it's okay. I will just force reduce it to 40, the max speed. The max speed you set up in config is always 2 kilometers per hour lower than what the tank will actually reach. So here I'm reaching 42 when my max speed is 40, and when my max speed was 42 I was reaching 44. So you can keep that in mind when you're tweaking your max speed to set it up 2 kilometers per hour lower than the actual max speed. And here I have a engine RPM at 2900, which is not the maximum, but so close that it's going unnoticed in your ears. So I'm going to keep this, just checking now that the final gears are not fucking up, and they are, of course, because what would be ArmA if it was not fucked up all the time? And you see here my gears are very powerful, and the acceleration is very bad. Here it's still, holy shit, still struggling. That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, stable at gear 4, 2353 RPM and 3000 RPM max speed. It's quite good. I want to talk to you about something which is still an issue. You must have noticed that with all tanks, even the vanilla tanks, you gain speed when you turn. And when you are actually already at max speed, like this, and you turn, your tank is going to gain speed and gain speed and gain speed again and again and again, until it will eventually slide, best case, or capsize, worst case. This is an engine issue. If you look at the thrust on top, I have one thrust, and if I turn left, I keep having one thrust, and actually this is wrong because the tank is still accelerating only on one side, and yeah, it makes that the tank is going to gain speed and gain speed over the max value. So I guess maybe that they are going to fix it because Rayard doesn't like it as well, and because it's happening on vanilla tanks, you can go above max speed as well. So yeah, annoying behavior. For those who are familiar with Iron Front, that's why some US tanks were able to reach like 400 kilometers per hour when you were playing like this, and you were going far above max speed, and were sent to the stratosphere at some point. Here, with the new physics parameters, if you set up everything correctly, even if you go above max speed, you are still limited. So the option to prevent the tank to reach too high speed, if here it's 60, I would say that's okay. But I want to try to reduce it. I'm going to tweak the damping rate in air and the damping rate itself. I think that decent value is 200, and so we are going to, because this is a Panther value and this is not a Panther, and I want just to check with you guys because I did this 3 weeks ago, so I already forgot. Damping rate, of course. Damping rate. So this value describes how quickly a free spinning wheel will come to rest. Damping rate describes the rate at which a freely spinning wheel loses rotational speed. So if you don't understand anything, it's okay. Or it's good. Yeah, so Riyad told me that a decent value is about 200, and so something new as well, I forgot to tell you where we reviewed the parameters, is that the two here are the same value. So that's new, or I mean that was not like this in my previous setup, so I was like, oh my god, what is this? And you see here that my tank is much more slow to gain speed, but it's still very powerful. And when I change the gear, well, first let's check this. I'm still reaching 60. A bit less. I'm sliding, that's why. You see that it has a very small influence because when you increase it, it's supposed to slow down the tank. But here you see the clunch is very strong between the gears. Like the gear is going to reach 3000 slowly, and when it changes the gears, the beginning of the next gear is very strong. So it can be you have to tweak, in that case you have to tweak the ratios here, but you can also tweak this again. I want just to try 250 just for testing purpose, because I lost the sense of values. You see how far the gears are changing. Top left, top right of the screen, you see the black arrow is my speed, and it goes very slow and change gear, a very strange gear. Blah, blah, blah. That's not good. So I want to tweak this. You want your last gear to be 1, to have a value of 1. And technically, it's pretty much going to be half every gear. Reduce half every gear. So it will certainly look even more terrible with those values. So yeah, the tank barely have any speed increase on the gearbox ratios. You can also change the clunch, which is here clunch trends, and let's try to reduce this to 15. So the clunch is how strong the gearbox is going to transmit the force to the wheels. And you see that's already a bit less jerky, so you still keep the black arrow. The gears are not full speed in 0.5 seconds, so it's quite interesting. Let's set it to 10. And we are about to finish because, well, it's not perfect, but we just have to do further tweaking, and I think okay, here it's much more smooth already. Yeah, it's much, oh, don't reach max speed, no! There is no miracle in physics. As you can see, I won't reach my max speed again, so let's 20. So it's mostly patience actually. And then I'm going to move it to some more complex ground instead of sand to test the speed on a normal terrain. Oh, come on. I have to get back to at least 30. And there is jerky again. And I still don't reach my max speed, so I have no choice. So how can I make it less jerky? Oh yeah, whatever. I will tweak it. Certainly put in the description what was the annoying value, because it must be something very slight. Yeah, so again, I think you have most of the most important informations to start working on this by yourself. Next time I will work on the turrets, so how to set up the rotation of the turret, the elevation of the gun, the optics position, the hatches, the hit points for the hull and the turret, which are important for damage management. I will also cover weapon configuration, proxies position, how to make some decent proxy placement. So the last part is, apart from the turrets setup, it's going to be mostly about the gameplay part. The turrets will be pre-worked, so I don't spend a ton of time on it, and they are imported in very small time, because we covered already most of the topics like memory load, geometry, fire geometry, and so on. It's working quite the same, so we're mostly going to focus on the gameplay aspects. And you can see that my tank, even if it's if it doesn't have a big gun yet, it's already moving correctly. Actually, it turns the turn rate is okay. It's maybe sliding a bit too much. Yeah, that's the thing I'm going to tweak, as well as the gearbox changes that are a bit too strong. I want to make them a bit more smooth, but other than that, the physics are already very decent. So it's very, the remaining part is fine tweaking and playing with values that you just try stuff. It's not very streamlined, but essay and error is still a the best way to tweak it. The formulas are not stable enough or not reliable enough to provide you very fine simulation based on real world data. So don't bother with this. Just run the standard values and tweak from those values to have something that fits to the game. Here you see that's working, and that's it. Yeah, pretty much I'm done. I hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time. If you have any question, of course, don't hesitate to post in the comment, or best way is to mention me on Discord. You can reach me on IronFront Discord, but you can also ping me on ArmA Discord in Model Maker channel. Just ping me, because otherwise I won't see it in the flow of messages. And I hope this is going to be helpful to you. Meanwhile, good luck with your tank, of course, if you're already working on it and waiting for this tutorial. And let's see you next time for the last part of this tutorial. Have fun and see you next time. Thank you for watching.